Hey everyone, we've been doing these for about a year and we're only just now getting around to Bordeaux. Now, I've said a couple of times on the channel that we'd probably never get to Bordeaux. Not because it's not important, it's arguably the most important historical wine region on planet Earth. Everything from putting corks in the bottles to glass bottles to the idea of wine being exported really does start in Bordeaux. But it's always been a question of price. Because you can certainly get Bordeaux at a price point that fits our tastings, that's true. You can't get Bordeaux generally that tastes like very much though, and there's a real difference with Bordeaux. So we're going to do a Bordeaux white. We have a cracking one, the Chateau Ferran. We're going to do Sauternes, and we're going to do an absolutely spectacular Sauternes in Chateau Roumieu. So I think maybe only our second or third dessert wine all time. That's going to be a lot of fun. The issue is with the reds. Left bank versus right bank. The left bank should be predominantly Cabernet. The right bank should be mostly Merlot. The issue is trying to get wines that fit in our budget that actually taste like a left or right bank Bordeaux, and not just generically like Bordeaux. Devin and I have spent quite a bit of time on this. I think we finally got it, so we're going to go for it. So, coming up, Friday, March 5th at 6 o'clock, we're doing it. We're doing Bordeaux. Left bank, right bank, white, and Sauternes. Tickets are $85. It's going to be a heck of a time. I hope you'll join us. Easy, and a little different than usual. Hi everyone, welcome to our Bordeaux tasting. I'm Kyle with Andrew Hilton Wine and Spirits, and well, this is a tasting I never thought I'd do. I really struggled, and Devin struggled, to actually find a way where we could fit a Bordeaux tasting in for $85, but gosh darn it, we just managed to do it. We have a great deal to cover tonight. Bordeaux is, in terms of the modern wine industry, the cradle of it. This is really where we start seeing concepts like draining vineyards to act, or draining swamps to make vineyards. We get things like the introduction of an export market as a major component, if not the major component of a wine industry, where domestic production ends up being, 25 or 30% and the rest is for export. This is really where glass bottles for selling wine became popular. This is where the idea of wine auctions became, commonplace. The story involves pirates, madness. Bordeaux is a lot of fun. But it's also, in a certain sense, not a lot of fun. Bordeaux's dominated by these first growths like Chateau Lafite Rothschild, Chateau Mouton Rothschild, Chateau Margaux, and Petrus, where the entry to a bottle of wine is well over $1,000. And Bordeaux, as a result, becomes really, really intensely not fun. Because of those, I've had Mouton Rothschild twice, and I believe I've had Margaux once. Of the rest of the actual first growths, I've never actually had a chance to try them, and I probably, in some respects, will never get to try all of them, even working in the industry, just because the price of admission is so high, and we don't really sell them down here. So let's talk about Bordeaux in general here. Bordeaux is a city and the vineyards around it. This is in southwestern France. As the crow flies, you are closer to northern Spain than you actually are to Paris. Now this is a big wine region. There are 276,000 acres of vines just in Bordeaux, not in France generally, just in Bordeaux, 276,000 acres of vines. Canada, for example, has 30,000, but Canada's a fairly new region. Let's use like an established European country like Hungary. Major wine producing country on the global stage, has less than half of that, at about 130,000 acres of vines. Bordeaux is absolutely massive. Let's get the dry white, the Chateau Ferran Saint Pierre, into our glasses. Now, this is Chateau Ferran Saint Pierre because there's actually a different Chateau Ferran in Grave, which uses the same name, but the full name of this winery is Chateau Ferran Saint Pierre. Aaron, is it time for it? So, no. It is time for maps, no. But it's now Super Maps. Super Maps. Super Maps time? Let me know we're good to go? Yeah. Okay, so in theory, well, I'm looking at the map. My pointer does not work on my screen.
Here, let go for a sec.
Yeah.
There you go.
There we go?
Yep.
There we are. So, welcome to the region of Bordeaux, and welcome to Super Maps, our brand new super janky. We just attempted it first about half an hour ago. Attempt to do maps on screen. So here is the city of Bordeaux. Now, this here is the river Gironde, and when we talk about Bordeaux, we're going to be talking a great deal about left bank and the right bank of the river. Left bank is where all of your really famous microstates are, and they are here in what we call the Medoc region. You can see the village of Pauillac here, but I mean you've got Listrac, Saint-Estèphe, Margaux. I wrote them all down. I'm missing Saint-Julien and Mouly, which is not really one of the really prestigious ones. They're all up through here in this very northerly part of the left bank. And what makes this region really famous is this is very warm and it's very gravelly soil, which Cabernet Sauvignon really likes. So these wines tend to be Cabernet Sauvignon dominated. On the right bank over here, the soil, while there's certainly some limestone and some gravel, clay is a lot more predominant. Where we have number 15 here is Pomerol, which is a really tiny little region right next to the village of Le Born. We definitely cannot afford a Pomerol. I was looking around, the least expensive Pomerol that I can order right now is $130 a bottle, my cost. So you notice the river Gironde comes down, it splits in half. To the north you have the river Dordogne, to the south you have the river Garonne. There are some other really premium regions we'll talk about a little tiny bit down here in the south. We do have the region of Pessac-Léognan, which is Pessac-Léognan even bloody mentioned on this map? It's not. It is right in here. It's number very close to number 3 and in here. Oops, we made a slight mistake with the choice of maps, but Pessac-Léognan's right in here. Grave is right here, and then Sauternes and Sauternes-Barsac are down here with number 5 in the very far south. But our wine that we're tasting first, our white wine, does not come from either of those two places. It comes from the region of Entre-Deux-Mers, which means between two seas, which is this peninsula of land between the two rivers. And this is predominantly white wine growing country. Now, I have introduced the left bank as being predominantly Cabernet Sauvignon. Is there a lot of Merlot here? Yes, there absolutely is. I've talked about the right bank as being mostly Merlot. Is there a lot of Cabernet Sauvignon here? Yes, there is, particularly in the region, the one we're actually going to be tasting here, of Fronsac, which is 13 here. Now, the thing about Bordeaux is we're really going to be talking very broad strokes. We are definitely going to be talking about things that are perhaps we're going to be making too many generalizations, but I want to be very clear. If I just talked about Bordeaux's history, Bordeaux's importance on the wine industry, all of that sort of thing, we would be here for 2 hours without tasting a single wine. Bordeaux is really and truly, in terms of history, the absolute heartland of the modern wine industry. So we aren't going to talk about that too much. So for tonight, the regions we're going to be talking about most are Entre-Deux-Mers for our first wine, the region of Fronsac up here at number 13 for our second, the region of the Haut-Medoc here with number 2 for our third, and finally Sauternes down here in the far south for our fourth wine. And I believe that does... You can't see the video there, Aaron? You got it sorted out? Okay, good. So yeah, that does rather close out Super Maps portion. So let's talk a little bit about Chateau Saint-Pierre. This is a Bordeaux white. When we're talking about grape varieties in Bordeaux, on the red side, we're going to be talking about Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Malbec, Carménère, historically not so much today, we'll get to that in a bit, and Petit Verdot. On the white side, however, we definitely talk a lot about Sauvignon Blanc. We talk quite a bit about Sémillon. And then there's actually the third, less appreciated grape, Muscadel. And then there is still a little bit of Sauvignon Gris and Sauvignon Naz, which are kind of sister grapes or hybrid grapes or cousin grapes of Sauvignon Blanc itself. The Chateau Saint-Pierre here, we're looking at 40% Sauvignon Blanc, 40% Sauvignon, 10% Sauvignon Gris, and 10% Muscadel. And you're immediately going to say, well, that doesn't smell like the Sauvignon Blanc that I get out of New Zealand or that I get out of the Loire Valley. If you're here for one of our Loire events, we've tasted some wines from kind of the central Loire, like Puy-Fumé or Sancerre, or wines very much like that. And they really remind you immediately of being kind of like New Zealand, but not so much grapefruit, not so much green pepper. They're dialed back and they have a little more minerality. This wine has more fatness, more richness, maybe a touch of residual sweetness, and some really like pretty aromatics that we wouldn't normally associate with Sauvignon Blanc. Now, Sauvignon Blanc absolutely can be a very aromatic grape variety, but I don't usually think of it as being a particularly delicate or perfumey one. I tend to get green bell peppers, grapefruits, limes. I tend to get very assertive flavors. This has much more of a perfumey delicate, and I think that's mostly coming from the Muscadel. Oh, and in the mouth, you definitely get the Sauvignon Blanc, bright, fresh, green pepper, grapefruit right up front, and then you definitely get lemon lime. And then as it comes across your tongue, that weight you're getting, that richness and fatness, that's the Sémillon. Sémillon really can be one of those grapes that, if it's done badly, Sémillon tastes like absolutely nothing. Badly made Sémillon is quite possibly the most boring grape variety you'll ever come across in your life. But when it's made well, where it tends to be in France, and then in a completely different style where they absolutely bake the ever-loving hell out of it, out of the Hunter Valley in Australia, it can be absolutely wonderful. Now, I promised I wouldn't bore you to tears with Bordeaux history and with culture and everything else. We will cover the 1855 classification when we get to the reds. I want to talk a little tiny bit about Bordeaux history, why it is, what it is, where it comes from. We've already covered geography quite well. Bordeaux as a region, we've got evidence, like written evidence of it existing back to about 379 AD. It's very likely there were grapes there before that, but this is the first written record of it. Real Bordeaux history happens in about the 12th century. Basically, the French king decided to get divorced because his wife couldn't give him a son. So his wife basically left him, and his wife literally owned, her name was Eleanor of Aquitaine, she owned basically all of Western France. Bordeaux itself falls into the ancient kingdom of Aquitaine, but she owned basically everything from Aquitaine up to Brittany. And when she divorced the French king, she kept all her land. And then she immediately turned around and married the King of England, which kicked off about 800 years of the French being pretty much perpetually at war with the French. They called it the 100 Years' War. It was more like a 500-year war because the French were really not keen on the English owning about half of France, particularly the west coast. As a result, when that happened, the British Crown, understandably, were like, well, we've got a whole bunch of new French subjects. They're probably not thrilled about being suddenly English, being, they don't actually speak English, and they'd probably much prefer to be part of France. We probably should do some nice things for them. And the big thing that they did for the people in Bordeaux was they waived all export and import taxes for getting wine from France to England. Now, at this point in history, wine was not actually in glass bottles, or at least it was very, very, very slightly coming in. Yes, this is actually a natural ferment on this. This is natural ferment. The Hourtin-Ducasse is organic. The Delphis de la Dauphine, I believe, is organically grown, but I couldn't find any conclusive evidence that it's actually 100% organic once it hits the winery. And Chateau Roumieu Sauternes, it's the only one I actually don't have like a tech sheet for or anything. There is effectively zero information about Chateau Roumieu online. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Chateau Roumieu itself, but more about Sauternes and how Sauternes is made. So yes, we have a tax-free situation with Bordeaux, and they start shipping wine to England because it's relatively close. It's completely tax-free. It hits London. It gets really popular. And immediately England and France pretty much go to war about 40 years later. Now, oh God, I like this wine. This was one of the wines that was the impetus for doing a Bordeaux tasting. Now, once the war kind of kicked off, of course, England still owned Bordeaux, but now they're struggling to get, wine from Bordeaux into England. At the end of the Hundred Years' War, so for about 300 years there, they go back and forth. The French slowly kind of take back what we'd think of as modern France, and Bordeaux remains one of the very last holdouts in the war. In 1453, at the end of the Hundred Years' War, basically the English get kicked out of this part of France once and for all. And all of a sudden, all these English merchants who set up in Bordeaux, all of a sudden, they get literally just thrown out of the country. And the Dutch basically step in and say, hey, we're not English. What do you want to do here? Let's start selling some wine to England. And am I glossing over 300 years of really important winemaking history in a breath? Yes, I am. But if I don't, we are never going to get through this. The Dutch basically start selling French wine to the English, still basically tax-free out of Bordeaux, and also because the English have a massive palate for what they now call claret. Claret is basically shorthand at this point for Bordeaux red. There is some historical confusion on what the name means. The interpretation I choose to believe is that at this point in history, and actually until very recent days, Bordeaux did make a wine it called claret, which was actually a blend of red and white grapes made together. Not quite a rosé, kind of like a lighter red. It's really not a style that these days we'd have any real modern analogous style to, because that's really not done very often. Even rosés are very, very, very rarely red and white grapes blended together. But yeah, that's where the term claret comes from, is basically the British term for Bordeaux wines, because they were thinner and lighter and maybe a little more elegant than others. The wines at this point in history were not of particularly high quality. It was basically Beaujolais Nouveau. The wines were shipped over, immediately consumed. They were said at the time not to last a full year, so they always needed new wine to come over. So that gets us to this point in history. The French and English, of course, go to war again, and now it's very difficult to get wine out of France. This is when England starts buying wine from Spain, and when it becomes a religious war and Spain joins the wars in favor of France because they're a Catholic country, they end up buying all the wine from Portugal. Where we get to the point where Bordeaux ends up being $1,000 a bottle, and where it ends up with not artificial scarcity, but partially artificial scarcity, is the fact that the English started buying French wines, especially Bordeaux's, at heavily inflated prices because they either had to be smuggled in or they were seized as prizes of war by English warships that would stop French shipping, because they were not obviously just shipping to England, they were trying to ship it to South America or to North America or to Northern Europe or wherever. Yeah, they were actually, a lot of the wine that was actually sold at auction was seized basically by legalized piracy as they claimed these warships or shipping ships, what would you call those, trading ships out in the middle of the ocean, and they basically just stole the wine and put it up for auction in London. So that is to a very, very small degree, Bordeaux history. Boo organic from Grant, I love that. And yeah, like we really love this Chateau Ferran. Devin and I think we've had this wine for about 18 months in the store. We actually carry the red as well. We absolutely love the Chateau Ferran white. We thought it was an absolutely dynamite bottle of wine. We actually carried the white for the better part of a year before we brought in the red as well, just because we like this so well. Very bright, very pretty, very fresh. Bordeaux white tends to be a much better deal than Bordeaux red. There is still some really expensive dry Bordeaux white out there, especially coming from Pessac-Léognan, but most of it is not terribly, terribly expensive for Bordeaux. What would I pair this with? Lemon chicken piccata is a great call. I would say clams. That little tiny hint of sweetness in this and that richness, just like fresh steamed clams with like parsley and butter, just right out of the shell. That and this would be absolute magic together for me. Oh, hello Don, welcome. What's the red like? The red, as it happens, is quite a bit like the Delphis de la Dauphine. And we are going to talk a great deal about winemaking, Grand Vins, and how the wine was made when we get to these next two here. So let's jump into the Delphis de la Dauphine. Now this is a right bank, and as is quite appropriate for a right bank Bordeaux, this is 100% Merlot. Now we are not tasting a Saint-Emilion. We are not tasting a Pomerol, because we simply can't at this price point. We are tasting something from Fronsac. Aaron, can we jump back to super maps for just a second? Absolutely. The timing was probably really bad for that, wasn't it?
Oh, I have...
you have a different map up. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. I can make that work.
Okay, give her.
All right. Different map, so give me just a second to get my bearings here. So yes, on this map, 14 right here, pointing this little tiny section down here next to the village of Libourne. Can I scroll in? No, I can't.
Yeah, you can. Here, roll the mouse thing. There you go.
There we go. Hey, there we go. Brilliant. We're really just rolling along with this thing, aren't we? Communication. So yeah, just to the north here, this confusingly also kind of harvest gold section here. That's Pomerol, and Saint-Emilion, I believe, will be 22. Those are the really high value areas on the right bank. Bourg and Blaye over here, which are 9 and 10 on the map, they're really, really good value sections. We quite often will bring in Bourg and Blaye. They're on really clayey soils, even though they're across the map from the really, really high end sections here. Like number 2 here would be Medoc wines, but 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These are your really, really, really high-end regions like Pauillac, Saint-Estèphe, Margaux, all that sort of thing. But we are going to taste wines from 12, and then the little tiny like thumb of land here. It's actually about 250 hectares of wine from a region called Canon-Fronsac, which is a sub-region of Fronsac. But we are number 12 here. So this is Fronsac, directly next door to Pomerol, but unlike a Pomerol, which is going to cost us well over $100, these are on the shelf for, I think we've got these on the shelf for around 28. What language is that map? I don't know. We stole it from Wikipedia, so yeah, I'm not sure. I think it Ozian? I have no idea. There we go. Hey, that's a nice map. That's the right bank right there. Yeah, look at that.
Well, here, let me just pull it up. Do you want to see it?
Yeah, let's see that. That's actually a slightly better map of the right bank.
Okay, there you go.
There we go.
No,
okay.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Give it back. Okay,
Super Maps has failed us.
There you go.
There we go. So yeah, slightly better map just of the right bank here, and what we consider the right bank. So you've got the lower end regions of Bourg and Blaye up here. You have Fronsac and Canon-Fronsac right here. Here is Pomerol itself and the sub-region of Lalande de Pomerol. And then, yes, 17 was actually Saint-Emilion over here. And then this was Castillon. One thing that's rather interesting is that all of that other stuff that we were talking about is just Premier Côte de Beaune or Bordeaux Superior. That is its own region. That's basically all the stuff that's just, it's Bordeaux, but it's not from any of the famous parts. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. So Fronsac, originally, if we go back to about the 18th century, at that point, Fronsac was the most expensive region in Bordeaux. Charlemagne loved this region so much, he actually built a fortress and then a chateau for himself there. It was considered to be the absolute star of Bordeaux, and then very quietly lost all of its prestige and everything else. It kind of fell apart. As a result, the wine quality remains absolutely exceptional, and prices for Fronsac are starting to rise. Now that normal non-billionaires can't afford Pomerol anymore, Fronsac is starting to become a little bit cool and sexy again. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about winemaking style and why winemakers matter. Now, Devin and I had, in terms of options for this, 3 wines that we could choose for the left bank that we actually respected and thought would be good, and 2 for the right bank. This was the other wine we just straight up said no. When we started doing the research, the reviews weren't great. The winemaking seemed really sketchy. It was just a non-starter. Our issue with this one was a gentleman called Michel Rolland. Michel Rolland is perhaps the most famous winemaker, at least within the wine industry on planet Earth. He owns something like 5 Bordeaux chateaus. He has his own winery in Argentina. He has like a couple in North America. Like, the man's stupidly wealthy now, but he got that by being this incredible consulting or flying winemaker, flying around all over the world. If you had the money to pay Michel Rolland, he would come and make wine for you. And that was his whole shtick. But what he did and what his style is very fruit-forward, rather oak-forward wines. That's just what he's known for. If you want to call these Robert Parker-style wines, that's not very far from the truth. In fact, it's pretty darn spot on. So this is a right bank Bordeaux. It is 100% Merlot, but it is made in what I would call a very 1990 to 2010 contemporary style, where the oak and fruit are right up front and any other characteristics are kind of secondary. You'll notice how clean and fruity and juicy this wine is. When we get to the Chateau Hourtin-Ducasse, you're going to feel like this wine tastes 5 to 8 years older than the Delphis de la Dauphine, and that's just because it's made in a slightly different style. Now, I will say this pretty much jumps up to the best under $50 Merlot in the store. And this does come back to a point that I have bemoaned many times before, that Merlot is insanely hard to buy for us as a business. Because Merlot just basically, there's not that many really great ones out there. Merlot is very often just shorthand for, okay, let's just make a red wine. Let's make it really low acidity. Let's pack it full of fruit and alcohol. Super easy. And Grant's not sure about this one. I'll be honest, Grant. When I tasted these two right before the tasting here, Devin had taken home the Delphis de la Dauphine. And I was like, oh, Devin, you took home the wrong one, mate. The Chateau Hourtin-Ducasse is, I think, a little more classically Bordeaux. This is lovely, but it's not what I would think of as being like old school Bordeaux. This is Bordeaux made in a style to appeal to everyone versus Bordeaux made in a style to appeal to people who just like Bordeaux. Now, here's an interesting thing about Bordeaux. We think about Bordeaux and it's super famous and they have 275,000 acres of vines. It's really a haves and haves not situation in Bordeaux. The top houses like Chateau Latour here, they tend to be that top 5%. They're making money hand over fist. They're doing just fine. They have no economic woes in the world. Everybody who isn't like a super recognizable name, which I'd actually say is all four of the wines in front of us, they're not one of those like, you say the name, it's like, oh yeah, Chateau Palmer, I know what that is. It's really expensive and it's got a black label. Like, you know what it is. The rest of Bordeaux is increasingly impoverished, largely because of the fact that just the only Bordeaux that are collectible are the really, really top end ones. And most people, including myself, have this bias towards Bordeaux where it's like, oh, it's Bordeaux. It's really serious and I can't afford it and the cheap ones are crap. That's in a sense true. Yes, you probably can't afford to drink high-end Bordeaux. I know I can't. But the lower-end Bordeaux have A, gotten a lot better, and B, were never that bad. And you're right. You do get dark chocolate, cocoa powder, black cherries. You do get it. Like, this is absolutely lovely in that right bank, juicy, fruity, fun style. Also, damn, actually that's changed substantially since I opened it. One other point of these wines are now 7 years old, or they will be this fall, I suppose.
Cool.
These are like well-aged Bordeaux wines that are ready to go. I really dig this for just the style that it is. I think it's very well done. And I realize I'm coming off as two minds about this wine, and that's because I really am. I really like right bank Bordeaux, and in a sense, I love that it's right bank Bordeaux. When we get to the Chateau Hourtin-Ducasse, I kind of wish it had more of these notes, because this is still, at least 5% Merlot. 46% Merlot. You can make Merlot like this. I kind of wish it had a little more of this. I think it's too clean for me. But my God, it's still really good drinking Merlot. Delphis de la Dauphine was actually owned at one point by Chateau Petrus, which is, I believe, apart from maybe Chateau d'Yquem, the Sauternes producer, is, dollar for dollar the most expensive of all of the Bordeaux houses. They're in Pomerol. Right bank versus left bank is kind of interesting this way. So, of all of the really, really prestige, you have to have it, super expensive left bank Bordeaux wines, all the like super crazy collector ones. all but one of them are on the left bank. They're Cabernet focused. But the one that's the most expensive, with a bullet most of the time, is Petrus on the right bank. So there really isn't a side that's more or less expensive than the others. I will say for premium wine, you look at just how small, I'm not going to bring up the map again, but if you remember just how small Pomerol was and how small Fronsac is, and how relatively small Saint-Emilion is, compared with all of the left bank. Aaron's choking on his wine. Hold on, Aaron.
Yes. At least he's drinking it.
So it is smaller, so there does tend to be less wine out there. You do tend to see maybe a little bit more of a price premium on right bank until you hit a certain point, and then just cheap right bank can be really bad. I would say I'd rather drink a cheap left bank over a cheap right bank, unless it came from Bourg Bly, because Bourg Bly are really good value. So that was Delphis de la Dauphine. I will actually make this point right now, and this is why I brought this wine out. So this one just says Pauillac. Pauillac, of course, is a region. This is the third wine by Chateau Latour. Now, a bottle of Chateau Latour, the Grand Vin, or the top of the range from them, is going to set you back about, depending on the vintage, $800 to $1,200 a bottle for a new vintage, substantially more for like an older bottle like an 88 or an 89 or an 82. And those can get into the tens of thousands at a certain point.
Wow.
Now, the second wine, so that's their prestige wine. They have a second wine. It's called the Fort of Chateau Latour, just the Forts of Chateau Latour. And then they have a third that's just called the Pauillac, named for the region. This is their third wine. So these wines sell for about $140. The second wine for about $450 a bottle. Down here, we just carry the third tier from them. So if you want a Chateau Latour, I do have one. It's just not the one you're thinking it is, because I don't sell a lot of wines at $1,000 a bottle. Color me surprised. Now, Delphis de la Dauphine is the second label for Chateau de la Dauphine. They make a wine just under the house's name, and it is about a $55, $60 bottle of wine. If we were to bring it in, we don't actually carry it. This is their $30 second label. Chateau Hourtin-Ducasse, you'll note, does it say it on the front of the label or only on the back? It does say it on the front. It says Grand Vin de Bordeaux. Grand Vin de Bordeaux, which means the great wine of Bordeaux. It doesn't have anything to do with the wine being like great or fantastic. Grand Vin simply means it's the top wine made by that estate. It is the number. It's the top of the heap. They actually don't make any second labels, or at least not that they put on their website. So this is their only release, or their top release from Chateau Hourtin-Ducasse. 46 Cab, 46 Merlot. Well, it's 5% Malbec. I did look at this earlier. 5% Cab Franc, 3% Petit Verdot. You're not going to see a lot of Petit Verdot in Bordeaux, just because it takes absolute ages to ripen and is very hard to grow there. It's the most expensive bottle we ever sold. It'd be very early on in my days. We actually did used to handle and trade in some of those true first growths. I can remember us having Chateau Palmer, which is technically a third growth. We will get into the classification growth system in just a minute, by the way. I can remember selling some of those, but that was back when, a bottle of Mouton Rothschild would set you back like $400, not like $1,000 to $2,000 a bottle. I think the most expensive single bottle of anything I've ever sold would have had to have been a Scotch, and it probably would have been around the $1,500 to $1,800 mark. And it would probably have been something like a Brora or a Port Ellen, something from a closed distillery that there just isn't any more of. Okay, Chateau Hourtin-Ducasse. Left bank, Cabernet dominated, and this is a little bit more of what I would classically call that Bordeaux style. There's your cigar box, there's your spiced cabinet, there's your wet, mossy characteristic. The fruit is definitely in the background. Those secondary kind of spicy, mossy, earthy characteristics are most definitely on top.
And Braille.
And is there Braille on the label?
Braille label.
That's cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Accessible.
There we are. Oh yeah, I guess we had. Yeah, I guess we did have. We had Louis XIII by Remy Martin. It was like $3,000, but it's also not very good.
No,
so
he just left. There
yeah,
brandy.
we did have Louis XIII.
$3,000, not very good brandy.
No, it's really remarkably not very good. You'd be absolutely shocked if you tried to be like, wow, I wasted a down payment on a car or on this. Sorry, I genuinely don't get it with Louis XIII. I just straight don't. Now this is, to me, what Bordeaux is all about. This is wonderful, but this to me is your classic Bordeaux aroma. That really spicy, rich depth. Oh God, I like this so much. Okay, so let's take a quick aside and talk about the 1855 classification. I'm not going to dive very far into the 1855 classification just because it's a lot to dig into. Basically, in the year 1855, they held a great big, basically a World's Fair in Paris. It was called the Paris Exposition. And Emperor Napoleon III, I believe, was the person in charge at the time. He basically said, well, what we need to do is we need to, make all of our really premium wines seem more accessible to more people. So they ranked all of the chateaux of Bordeaux based both on quality, yes, but also on price, which at that point, ridiculous wine overhyping wasn't as prevalent as it is today. So they ended up basically taking all of the wines of Bordeaux and ranking them. The absolute pinnacle was given the status of first growth. There's 5 of them. Then second growth, third growth, fourth growth, fifth growth, and then below that was basically called Cru Bourgeois. I'm not going to dip my toe into Cru Bourgeois very much, other than to say that Cru Bourgeois is complete madness. It's existed literally since slightly after the 1855 classification. At one point, it has been banned completely and utterly disassembled in 2007. It was reinstated in 2010. It was revamped again in 2012. They're going to revamp it again in, I guess they just revamped it again in 2020. No, Cru Bourgeois is absolute madness. In theory, it's supposed to be wines that are a step above just regular Bordeaux Superior, but don't challenge the 1855 classification. New wineries should be allowed to challenge the 1855 classification, but they're not because way too much money is tied up in it. So if you're Chateau Hourtin-Ducasse, you can make the greatest wine in the history of Bordeaux, but you're never going to sell for much more than $50 a bottle because you're not part of that 1855 classification. Yes, there are chateaus like Chateau Gloria that have kind of bucked that aren't part of the 1855 classification, but broadly, this is a ranking of the wines and how good they were 170 years ago. It doesn't have a lot to do with modern quality other than the fact that it has a lot to do with modern pricing. Some of the wineries have actually gone away. 3 of the third growth wineries don't exist anymore. The 1855 classification doesn't do anything for me. Yeah, no. God, I like this though. This is already an immediate front runner for my favorite of the night. And I realize this is probably not going to be a lot of people's favorite, but to me, this is what Bordeaux smells like. And let me tell you why. With the Delphis de la Dauphine, I got so much fresh fruit. I got pretty oak notes. I got the mossiness, and it was very primary. It's the things you would get out of a young wine. This is a 2014. I can sell you wines on my shelves right now that are from 2018 or 2019 that still have all of that bright, fresh primary fruit. This adds on to that, and it adds that cigar box, that adds that spice, that adds that dried fruit, it adds mushrooms, it adds kind of a earthy, mossy stoniness that I really appreciate with this. And yet it's still light, it's still fresh, it's still easy to drink, and this is something you just buy off the shelf for under $30. So, you know what, if you're somebody who says, oh, well, Bordeaux, I love this flavor, but, oh, I can't afford $1,000 a bottle. No, that's like $27.95. It's not desperately, desperately expensive, or at least it doesn't have to be. One of the problems is, if we're not talking about Mouton Cadet, which I'm not going to particularly, most Bordeaux, even absolutely wretched Bordeaux, will show up on the shelf at least $22, $23 a bottle. Not because they spent any money on it, not because it's any good, not because it's scarce. There's 275,000 acres of grapes in Bordeaux. It's not like they're gonna run out. But they know because it has the name Bordeaux on it, they can charge at least $20 a bottle for it. And that has horribly polluted the Bordeaux market, especially at the lower end, where people will pick up a bottle of Bordeaux and okay, yes, Devin and I kind of blind bought these a little tiny bit. There was a moment when I tasted this week and I said, oh my God, thank God this isn't terrible. Because buying Bordeaux really is that much of a crapshoot. No, Aaron laughed, but it really is that much of a crapshoot. Devin and I bought these. We did the research we could, by which we Googled the shit out of it. But really and truly, buying Bordeaux is really a blind process because there's so much bad stuff out there. Thank you, Devin. You're the one who actually did price these wines when they came in. I didn't do that, so you did. Thank you. Yeah, I really groove on this. If you like the Delphis de la Dauphine, great. If you like this, great. But the other thing that I really like about these and why I like them in this order, what do we usually say about the right bank? It's mostly Merlot. It's juicier, it's friendlier, it's more accessible to everyone. It's a Bordeaux for everybody. I would say that Delphis de la Dauphine, I could sell that to anybody and their mom and they would like it, assuming they liked red wine. This, I'm not sure I could sell that to most people and they would know what the heck it was. I think somebody who was coming out of Apothic Red or out of Yellowtail or something would taste that and be like, oh dear God, it's spoiled. And I can understand why they would think that. This is very different. But that's always kind of been the perception, is that the left bank was, very serious and very refined and very old-fashioned, and the right bank was a little more fun. And if nothing else, I think these two wines did rather demonstrate that disparity a little tiny bit. Yeah, I'm right there with you, Sean. Like, I'm all about this Hourtin-Ducasse. This bottle is not surviving the night at some point. Okay, so let's move to, and Aaron, you can correct me on this.
Sure.
This is our first proper dessert wine in the year we've been doing these things. This is our first actual dessert wine.
I believe so.
Devin's probably already writing, actually, Kyle, in week 14 you did this. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Sauternes. If anyone wants the super map again, just throw super map in the comments and I will review where Sauternes is in reference to the rest of these. But it was in the deep south of Bordeaux.
All caps only, please.
Yeah, all caps only, please. Sauternes is a really interesting one. This is predominantly Semillon with a little bit of Muscadel. You absolutely can put Sauvignon Blanc into Sauternes. Chateau Roumieu is a little tiny house that we actually kind of direct broker out of France. It's been our house Sauternes for literally longer than I've worked here. I really like the Sauternes style. Now, when we talk about making dessert wine, it's all about taking water out of the wine to concentrate the sugar and concentrate the flavor. There's lots of ways you can do that. You can throw it in a barrel, kind of like they do with port or sherry or Australian Muscat, or I'm going to throw Mac Van de Jura in there, even though it's a lot more complicated than that. And basically, you take a relatively dry wine and you just desiccate it so much that the remaining sugar makes the wine very sweet. You can do it like they do with ice wine, where they freeze the grapes and only the juice that's so sugar concentrated and so acid concentrated that it literally won't freeze. That's the only thing you press out, and that super juicy, beautiful nectar, that's what you actually get out of it. With Sauternes, it's slightly different. We do have some map requests there, and do we want to bring up the super maps, please, sir?
Well, if you got a zone in mind.
I got a zone. Well, let me. Actually, I can't bring up the zone until you let me back in.
That's right.
But
Okay,
yeah, let's go back to the super map then, Aaron.
Super maps.
We have some time.
All right. Popular demand.
Popular demand. We are.
Give me that mouse.
You got the mouse.
Sharing a mouse.
We are sharing a mouse. Yes, that's the downside of super maps, is we're sharing a mouse.
Maps are live. Give her.
All right, let's have a look
just
here.
hang tight. There you go.
Now we're good. Okay, so once again, this is the Gironde. There's the Dordogne. There is the Garonne
Click
in
in
the
there.
south. Oh,
There
sorry.
you go.
There we
Now
go.
they can see.
Now they can see. So here's the Gironde. There's the Dordogne. There's the Garonne. I actually got the mouse pointed much closer to the rivers this time. I'm glad we got a do-over. So yeah, here's Medoc. So this is where wine number 3 came from. It would have mostly come from this southern region because these northerly regions are quite famous. There's the city of Bordeaux itself. This is Grave as well as Pessac-Léognan. I have no idea why this map merges the two, but they do. This is predominantly where most of your better white wines come from. It's kind of this southern part of the left bank. Passeron, this is Sauternes and Barsac down in number 5 here. This is the core of the sweet wine country for Bordeaux. Interestingly, there's actually some really premium, interesting oddball regions over here on kind of the southern tip of Entre-Deux-Mers. I want to particularly draw attention to Cadillac, Côte de Bordeaux. I actually really like wine from here. We carry a couple of Cadillac. I don't know if Cadillacs as like a car manufacturer is named for here, but they're spelled the same. And we actually have a wine I really like in the shop from Cadillac. It's only Côte de Bordeaux, so it's one step above Bordeaux Superior, but it is kind of an up-and-coming red wine region in the wildly more white wine-dominated Entre-Deux-Mers. So our very first wine, the white, came from this Entre-Deux-Mers, between two seas, which really means between two rivers, between the Dordogne and the Garonne. Our second wine, the Delphis de la Dauphine, came from here in Fronsac, which is of course right next door to Pomerol. And then our third wine came from right here. So that is maps once again. So our dessert wine is coming from way down here.
Cool.
Does it smell like sweet popcorn? A little tiny bit. I actually get like maybe something oddly reminiscent of like dill pickle chips in the absolute oddest way, like Colonel's dill pickle popcorn, honestly. There is something, and it's not by any means the dominant note, but now that you've put that in my head, there's something in here that smells like walking past Colonel's in the Park Place Mall, and it smells like the vinegary salts they use. There's just something in here like that, and I have no idea why. I'm not going to even like try to tell you why. It was a sensory memory for me. So I was talking about taking water out of grapes. How the folks in Sauternes do that is really interesting. They do it using a mold, and it sounds gross because it is. It's called noble rot. So what this is when you come into this part of the southern part of Bordeaux, in the morning it's very cold and it's very wet, and these big, dense, heavy fogs roll over the vineyard, and they coat the whole thing in this gray, heavy, sticky mist. And basically a mold forms on the outside of the grapes because it's really gross outside. But as the day warms up, and we're still in early fall, so the days still get very warm, that fog burns off. And as that fog burns off, the mold itself actually dries out and it goes into a dormant state and it pulls back. And then when it gets wet again, it kind of rejuvenates, and then it dies back, and then it rejuvenates. So this process doesn't eat into the actual juice or the flesh of the grape at all, but it does punch little tiny holes in the outside of the grape skin. Now, this particular mold or fungus, it's found all through the wine industry. When it's not doing this very precise exact thing, is super threatened by climate change, by the way. It's basically just called gray rot, and it ruins tens of thousands of acres every year just by rotting the grapes on the vines so they're completely unusable. But in Sauternes, and in a couple places in California, and in 1 or 2 places that they've tried it in Australia, it works. It's almost a little bit magic. It's called noble rot or Botrytis cinerea. It's literally gently drying out the grapes on the vine while they're still growing, and it's making these super honeyed, super different dessert wines. And the botrytis adds its own characteristic. Just like yogurt tastes different than milk because of the bacterial culture, the fungus does actually add something to the wine, and it's just indescribably different. Sauternes and its neighbor Barsac, they just do unbelievable, beautiful, sticky, honeyed, stunning dessert wines that are the absolute perfect comparison or companion to like creme brulee or any of your really sweet kind of pure sugar desserts. It really is juice from a natural raisin. Yes, Grant, thank you. That's a wonderful way of putting it. Donna, I also get dill like crazy. Get dill like for days.
Dill for days.
Which is odd because I normally don't get dill out of Sauternes, but I really do out of this particular bottle in front of me. You'll notice this does say Grand Vin de Bordeaux, so this is the, I believe, the one and only product that Chateau Roumieu makes. They only make Sauternes, which is interesting because that climate condition, that noble rot that they need, the fogs in the morning, hot afternoons, just like ice wine, they don't get those conditions every single year. So there are definitely years where Chateau Roumieu kind of walks out in early November. It's like, well, didn't get fucking heat. Guess we don't get wine this year. We're just fucked. So that is one of the things with Sauternes, just like it is with ice wine. They're really dependent on the actual conditions showing up. It can be an unbelievable year for Bordeaux. Like you can have, you know, things like Chateau Latour selling for double the normal value, because in great years that happens in Bordeaux. But they just don't get the conditions in Sauternes. It just doesn't happen for them, so they don't get wine, which is very, very sad. Man, you know, the more, I know I said dill early and Dawn doubled down on it, the more I smell this, the more I get dill, and I'm actually really into that because I like fresh dill. But it's almost a little distracting just how much dill is in this. You know, we completely forgot Shameless Promotion Corner, and I'm totally okay with it because we got to drink Bordeaux all night.
52.
I know. And yes, Devin's right. Sauternes is actually the perfect pairing with foie gras. I forgot about foie gras. Yeah, that's lovely. I'm really curious for rankings tonight because I don't have any bloody clue. Oh, and thank you, Debbie. Yeah, I do not hate my job. You know, it doesn't.
Wow, it does smell like pot.
Pot?
Pot.
I get dill. I'm not picking up the pot thing. Perhaps it's because I don't smoke pot. That thing you learned about me tonight.
Stinkweed.
Like, yeah, stinkweed?
Yeah, like Cooley stinkweed. Yeah. Heard the magic word. Interesting.
Soft mild cheese. I think this was actually so concentrated it would overwhelm the soft mild cheese. Grant's first in with the rankings, so he goes 3, 1, 4, 2.
Interesting.
I'm really with Grant. I mean, this is definitely my number 1. This is definitely my number 4, although it's a strong lineup. I know I say that usually, but this is a strong lineup. These are so different, I'm struggling to pick between the two. I'm going to give the nod actually to the dry white. 1, 2, 3, 4, although these two are really close, but for me it's the Hourtin-Ducasse. This absolutely. Please do not bring me some pot. I've tried pot. I'm not some like horrible Luddite blushing virgin. I just don't like pot as it does bad things to me. I don't enjoy it. Yes, thank you, Mike. Mike being probably one of the 4 people on earth who've ever actually seen me high definitely will agree that I am not good on pot. Wow, we really said that on camera, didn't we? Deanne has these as 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 4, 2, 3, 2, 1, 4. That's a fun ranking. Yeah, I'm right there with that. I like that. Elizabeth refuses to rank. Elizabeth, why are you not ranking? I'm curious to know. Not criticizing. I'm just curious to know why you're not ranking because I think these are very rankable to me. This is one of the very few ones where I have at least a reasonably clear idea in my head of what I want these to do.
We still need to do shameless promotion.
Yes,
corner.
thank you, Kevin. We do need to do shameless promotion corner. Let's do that now.
We're late, but we'll do it.
Well, we're late, but we will actually do it. Because we have a Scotch tasting to talk about, which is always fun.
And the beer rules. Sex Palace.
Yes, let's talk about the beer first, because the beer is coming up first chronologically. We have Situation Brewing out of Edmonton joining us. And we'll be joined by Curtis Weber, who is, I can't remember if he's actually the brewer or if he's just a rep, but he is definitely going to be joining us. I think he's actually one of the owners. But yeah, Curtis Weber is going to be joining us from Situation Brewing out of Edmonton. We have done Situation kind of here and there. We did the tea saison. We've done the page turner once before, but we've never done a focus on it. we are going to do the Page Turner IPA. We're going to do their Irish Red Ale, which I'm very, very excited about. I really like. Nobody does Irish Reds anymore, and I really like them, so I'm very excited for this. Do the Sex Palace Imperial Stout, and then we will do their Salty Senorita Tequila Lime Goza, which I always like those tequila sours. I think those absolutely rule. And then we have Scotch tasting next week, joined by Lee Hansen and
You.
35% chance Andrew Lang from Scotland. There's a chance it'll happen. We're still working on it. It's very unlikely, but there's still a chance. I'm not going to give up on it till I'm told no. And yes, post-COVID, we can definitely do like an in-store thank you to everyone. I still do want to do post-COVID everyone from the beer tastings, and we'll also invite the wine tasting folks. We all like rent a couple buses and we go up to all the great breweries that we've talked about for the last year and visit Annex and Establishment and Cabin and 88 and Zero Issue and all those cats. And we just have like a crazy beer buster day where we all get like super loaded on beer and like travel around to breweries. That would be really fun.
I'll film it.
And Boogie's Burgers,
Boogie's
Mike.
Burgers.
Yes, we'll pre-order everything and get Boogie's Burgers. So, Scotch tasting. Tickets are $30, and we're doing some pretty old stuff. We've got a single grain 21-year cast strength from the Sovereign. The idea of this one is Andrew Lang, obviously Lang Family Bottlers. They own 4 or 5 different lines. We're not doing any of the like crazy $600 ones. Fun story on that. I could have done one, but it would have been trickier. It would have raised the price about $10 a bottle or $10 a kit, and I wasn't comfortable with that. Sovereign 21-year single grain. We're trying to do all of the different lines. First editions, we have a Macduff 20-year. This is absolutely stunning. There was a little tiny scrap left after we poured all the sample kits. This rules. Hepburn's Choice Tullabarnine 12-year out of a wine cask. This is really special. And then finally, Blair Athol, Steve First's favorite distillery from Pitlochry. This is out of a bourbon cask, which is why I think this is really interesting. My favorites out of this lineup when I tasted them earlier today, definitely the Tully and the Macduff. Devin in particular loved the Macduff, and he's not usually a huge Scotch guy. This Blair Athol, what I thought was interesting about it is I think of the last 8 or 10 Blair Athols we've got in, almost all, if not all of them, have been out of sherry barrels, so I've kind of come to associate that really sweet sherry character with Blair Athol. This is ex-bourbon, so that's going to be really, really pretty. So that'll be really fun. So other than that, we're here for questions, comments. Unlike the beer tasting on Wednesday, I'm not absolutely dying to pee, and I'm going to quickly wrap things up and bolt off camera. So, you know, yeah, Wednesday went badly at the end. Wednesday was not our finest hour. That was the quickest I've ever wrapped up a tasting. I was just dying. Fish and Game Hut would be actually really fun.
Oh man.
Fish and Game Hut, like wine tasting?
So many dead animals to film. It'd be sweet.
I mean, if only I owned a large building that we could close on like a Tuesday evening because no one would care and we could all like come in and hang out and yeah, weird, right? If anybody's worried about that becoming like super like commercial, but like, you know, no, you can't buy anything. You can come back tomorrow.
Yeah, sorry.
Aaron, what was your favorite? What did you like tonight?
The Delphis.
The Delphis, nice. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
The Chateau Ferran.
throw your mic on. What do you like? Talk about the Hourtin-Ducasse with the Delphis, because I was very much on this side. Why did you like it the other way?
Oh, because I don't know anything about wine.
That's not fair.
Okay, well, I mean, it's true though.
You've been sitting in that chair for a year. Just by osmosis, you've learned a lot about wine.
You know, 86% occupied. You know, so I retain about the, you know, the whatever the math computes to. You know, but and I don't know. I just thought it was. What did I think? I don't know. It was definitely more pleasing to me right off the bat. I like the Sauternes. Is that what we're talking about at the end here? This like dessert wine. It's yeah, that like had that was the most like I guess like it was the most pungent on the nose. Like obviously everyone was joking about pot and stuff like that, but like it's absolutely true. But reading like the popcorn on the on the mouth, absolutely, like it was you know, I think that was the most like contrast, you know, from what it smelled like to what it tastes like for me.
And it's not just dill and popcorn and pot. There's actually quite a bit going on here, and I'll revisit this very briefly, just because I think we got a little distracted with how much it really smelled like dill and popcorn and pot.
But yeah, like green tea.
Green
Popcorn,
tea,
like popcorn green tea, like to me.
but also honey, like fresh, right out of the pot, honey. So is Bordeaux wine really just the region? Yes. So let's talk about this a little bit. So I realize I got a little bit off track, so we're going to talk about the Sauternes, but I did get a really good question. Yes. So if you see wine labeled Bordeaux, it's not coming from one of these other more famous regions of Bordeaux. It's not going to say Pauillac or Fronsac or Haut-Medoc or Entre-Deux-Mers or Sauternes. This is basically the side dishes of Bordeaux. It's none of the main courses. It's one of the others. There are some absolutely amazing Bordeaux Superior. You know, silver lining of the horrifying climate change we're going through. Bordeaux's getting warmer and drier and easier to grow grapes in. Fun thing about Medoc that we didn't get to, and why the Dutch wine trade is actually so important, and why I actually focused on it for a minute, and then, you know, immediately forgot why I was focusing on it. They actually drained the Medoc. The Medoc was absolutely a swamp. So that literally the most important part of Bordeaux, where all of, except for Petrus, all of the really, really stupid expensive stuff comes from, pre the Dutch wine trade, was literally a swamp that they just grazed cattle in, and had absolutely no redeeming value whatsoever. It was actually the Dutch that, using apparently fairly advanced tech for their time, changed that all around. So the Medoc actually owes everything to the Dutch that way. Why can you not, actually Becky has a really interesting question. Why cannot I identify any of the scents myself, but as soon as you list them, I'm like, yes, that's it? Two reasons. One, when I taste Cabernet Sauvignon, because I've had a lot of formal wine training and also just working in the business as long as I do, when I taste Cabernet Sauvignon, it's like, okay, what should I get from Cabernet? It should taste like black currants and then black cherries. Do I get black currants? Yes, cool, let's talk about that. Do I get black cherries? Yes, cool, let's talk about that. Do I get cigar box? Yes, cool, let's do that. Do I get cedar? Do I get X? I'm looking for the most common notes. This smelling like kernels, popcorn, dill pickle chips, and pot, apparently, that's definitely not on that list. But those are things that sometimes jump out just because a huge part of my day, I mean, a very large part of my day is really boring and it's doing books in the back. But a large part of what I do is nosing wine, looking for certain characteristics, and just when you smell things for a living every day, it's like one of those Reddit questions, like describe your job badly. I smell things for a living, and I judge them harshly for how they smell. No, that's really, it's honestly and truly like scent training, for lack of a better term. You really do, know what you memorize what you're supposed to smell, and then after you've kind of eliminated those things, you kind of can riff on that and say, okay, well, I've gotten the things that I'm supposed to or not supposed to off this wine. What else does it smell like? And then you can start putting things together. So if I get vanilla and I get lime, it's like, well, that's suggestive of, does this smell like key lime pie? It kind of does, because that vanilla lends into some barrel aging, lends into some toasty characteristics, and now I'm kind of seeing like toasty graham cracker crust and lime, and that's key lime pie. Yeah, and Devin has a really good answer there as well. Please read his answer as well. That's fantastic. Would I do a gin tasting? Yes, that is definitely coming. Yeah, gin is coming. The thing we want to do with gin is we want to find a way to tie it into our very one-time and abortive cantankerous cocktail series and do something a little more interesting with gin. That's something that has been under development between myself and Mike and Aaron for quite a while. So gin and cocktails are coming. I bought a whole bunch of little Uline bottles, actually in 4-ounce sizes, so that we could do like 4 ounces of gin, so you could pour yourself 4 different 1-ounce gin cocktails and spread it across that. So we definitely have that coming up. Also, I kind of want to wait for the gin tasting for the super cool Italian gin from Poli from the grappa tasting to show up, because that sounds freaking amazing, and I kind of want to throw that in there if we can. Just because it would be a really nice shout back to the grappa tasting. Are we going to do a St. Patty's tasting?
Ooh.
I mean, what would we do for St. Patty's? Green beer, green wine. We could do, we could do Vino Verde.
Yeah.
For St. Patrick's Day, because I think that would fall on about the right date. And I know cocktail promises and no follow through. I've been promising the cocktail thing would happen. I am familiar with how much of a hypocrite I am on that. Yeah. St. Patrick's Day does fall right around that time.
That's like anniversary zone.
It is anniversary zone, but we have something planned for the anniversary thing. That's going to happen maybe the week after.
Yeah.
In fact, that might be after, we're trying to go wine, spirits, but I could see going tonight, Scotch, St. Patty's thing, and then doing our 1 year anniversary of the tasting maybe the next Friday, because I do have plans for that. Something St. Patty's. I would really like to do like a Vino Verde event. My favorite Vino Verde in the world, we haven't been able to get the last 3 months, so I'm out of it. We'll do some digging around for that.
Did you talk about that cool bottle?
Sorry, cool. Oh, the 1962. Yeah, I've left this sitting on the counter for quite some time and not talked about it. This was one of the very first tastings. That was a very expensive light Aaron just knocked on the ground.
Aaron knocked. I did, I guess.
You did. You have. Don't put this on me. Sorry. Oh, these tastings always go on too long, and I love it. This was one of the very first tastings I actually got to come to at the store. It was a very, very old Sauternes tasting that my dad put on, and I was lucky enough to be at it. This was about 2003 or 2004. We had this 1962 Chateau Clément from Sauternes, and it was absolutely spectacular. This was sweet. We actually had a dry Sauternes from 1958. I was going to bring the bottle over, but A, it was really dusty, and B, the label looks really dumb because it was the 1950s. It looks like utterly ridiculous. But yeah, like the 1958 was fascinating because we opened it was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. And then like we went back for a second tiny like sip 10, 15 minutes later. It wasn't long and the wine was gone. It had completely fallen apart. It had exactly like 8 to 10 minutes of brilliance left in it and then it was gone. Aging wine is a bit of a mug's game. Irish whiskey is a theme. And no, we're not doing green beer. We might do... No, we're not doing green beer. I mean, we could do beer with green ingredients in it. We could do things like tequila lime sours and key lime sours, and I guess all hops are green, so all beer has a green ingredient. Oh, that was a terrible idea. No, we need to find something interesting. Irish whiskey as a theme is tough just because there aren't very many interesting Irish distilleries, just because the Irish distilling industry is just barely getting off the ground after the bad old days of Jameson and Bushmills controlling the whole industry. And while there are some new distilleries that have opened up, there's not that many. I do need a pop-up order form because that would be hilarious, but that also seems really cynical and not my style.
Pop-up order form? No way. That seems like a really good idea.
It does seem like a really good idea, but
idea.
it's so cynical.
It's not cynical.
I think it's cynical. Best alternative to Guinness, literally drinking anything else. Okay, let's take this seriously. Blind Man Trephammer Porter is just reliably excellent. I absolutely love the Rumpel Stout Skin from Outcast. I thought that was one of the best coffee stouts I've ever had in my life. We just recently brought back Old Rasputin Russian Imperial Stout from North Coast Brewing. That actually hit the shelves again this morning. We've been out of it for the better part of 18 months, 2 years. That's great dark beer. 88's Good Morning Vietnam is fine. It's not my... It's okay. I don't know. I love 88. I've never really loved Good Morning. I think it's okay. Fat Sherpa from Establishment's pretty all right. In fact, it's a little better than just all right. I like that beer, especially if you're looking for a slightly lower alcohol option. A lot of dark beers tend to be a little higher in alcohol. If you want something a little closer to 5%, Fat Sherpa is a good way to go. All the things. No. No, in fact, I would say don't.
Just all the things tasting.
Just all the things.
Yeah.
Just me.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Just me screaming the F-bomb at the camera for an hour. Great. I'm sure everyone would enjoy that very much. Actually, knowing this crowd, they might enjoy that. But no, we're not doing all the things lineup.
Irish car bombs, just like dirty, lousy cocktails.
Which would just be, okay, for that you'd have to be on camera. It would be you and me just getting loaded for an hour while people watched and made fun of us.
Sure.
That idea has some, legs, but I don't think that's really the way to go.
Bad beer cocktails.
Bad beer cocktails.
Bad beer cocktails. Or like drop shotty, like, I don't know, those kinds of things.
How do we actually sell it as a kit, though? Because
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. Like, we need so much glassware to make that work.
Here's your Kilkenny and here's your bottle of Jameson, and away you go.
I mean, the problem with Irish styles is, not a lot of people make them, Kevin. Okay, now Becky's making Irish car bombs, so that's actually kind of good. But yeah, I mean, I like well-made Irish reds because they kind of balance that, sweet and hoppy characteristic. They can be very pretty. I like how rich they can be. I like how fruity they can be. I like that they can have kind of cherryish, strawberryish characteristics coming off the malt. But A, there aren't a lot of like Irish craft breweries that we get here, and B, things like dry Irish stouts. I honestly can't remember the last craft brewed version of a dry Irish stout that I saw, because it's a really specific style. Like Guinness, historically they take 2 or 3 or 4% of the beer away, and they'd age it in a barrel to actually deliberately sour it and add it back, and that's why the beer seemed very dry. Was while beer is generally a little bit on the sweet side, they added like super vinegary sour beer back in a very low percentage to make the beer very dry. That's a really uncommon style these days. You don't really see it. Like, I'm trying to think of, like, Wild Rose was the last, like, craft brewery I saw do one. Yeah, it's not super common.
Well, you've got ideas.
How many staff do I have? Well, I mean, we got myself, Devin, Corey, Nigel, and Mike are kind of like the core team. Aaron is an independent subcontractor, but I mean, Aaron's basically part of the team. He gets invited to the Christmas party anyway.
Yeah.
And then we've got Ryan, who's part-time, and he kind of works a couple days a week running cash. We've got George, who does our out-of-town deliveries for us, because that's all he wants to do. And then we have Carolyn, who is our consulting bookkeeper, who comes in. She's also an independent contractor, also gets invited to the Christmas party because she's awesome. Yeah, she's also part of the team. So that's literally all of us. And then, in fall, assuming we're allowed to do in-person Scotch tastings in fall, we'll have Steve back, I assume, if he's not too busy building his weird Victorian Tudor paneled living room. If you don't know Steve Firth or don't follow him on Facebook, he's building this absolutely bizarre, like, yeah, he's got this like Tudor manor library he's building in his house, which is madness. But yeah, that's really it.
Hanging out in the Arctic Circle.
A local brew competition. I mean, the Lethbridge Warthogs, which I am a past member of, do an absolutely spectacular job of judging that. I know that Mark Whitehead's no longer involved, but I have actually judged local homebrew competitions because that sort of thing's really important. I don't brew myself anymore, so I haven't been as involved with the club, but Lethbridge Warthogs are a really fun club, and they're a really good way to get irresponsibly drunk by like 2 p.m. on a Sunday once a month. No, it's a good club. I don't think I need to do a local homebrew competition just because the current club does such an incredible job. Or at least did when I was still a member. Yeah, we did get that dry Irish stout from SYC, Devin, you're right. Forgot about that one. All right, I think we are at the end of questions. I think we're at the end of the night. We are 15 minutes past where we usually wrap up. So, well, I knew Bordeaux was going to be a long one. I hope I kept the history short enough. I hope you have a rough idea that what were kind of the broad strokes I was trying to make. Right bank is from Merlot, left bank's Cab. I think we covered that. Inexpensive Bordeaux doesn't have to be terrible. You don't have to spend $100 plus on Bordeaux. I think we definitely got that illusion out of the way. Bordeaux can be white and also awesome. I think a lot of people's favorite of the night was actually the Chateau Ferran. I think slightly less than 15% of the total Bordeaux produced is made as white, and then another 2 or 3% is made as Sauternes. I really did want to talk about that. I think we got that done. And then, yeah, Sauternes, important to talk about. It's such a huge part of the Bordeaux story. We have to do this. So, Kevin, it wasn't so much about keeping the history short. It was about keeping it short enough. Really and truly, Bordeaux's history, we could just generally talk about. So, Bordeaux did this. 70 years later, it became common practice in wine. And this is why. And we could do that for like 25 or 30 things. Bordeaux really was the first commercial wine industry, whereas, you know, like in Italy and in Greece and in the rest of France, the wine industry was started by monks who wanted to take their time and they were just trying to cover their costs. And it was very, you know, small and very delicate. The first like commercial wine industry that was started out by speculators moving to Bordeaux because they got cheap tax rates from the British government. Bordeaux really was like the first commercial wine industry. So like wine as a capitalist product really does start in Bordeaux. It's so different from the rest of the wine industry. And because there was this absolutely ludicrous amount of money flowing through Bordeaux, we didn't even get into the way that they basically screwed everyone from upriver. If you saw the map, like there's 2 rivers that become the Gironde. There's many other rivers that then become those. All those other wine regions that were upstream, like Gaillac, they basically got completely screwed by the Bordelais because they put these massive, massive export taxes on their wines, purely to be protectionist, so that only the wines that were exported from Bordeaux, you know, they'd be the same price as the wines that were much cheaper from upriver, but they'd be the same price once they left the port. They could just keep so many francs in their pocket. It was absolute madness.
We need a volume 2.
Of Bordeaux?
Volume 2.
We kind of do need a volume 2 of Bordeaux because there's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for that. That was fun. We have now almost got an hour and 20 minutes. Unlike Wednesday, I don't need a bathroom break, so I'm fine. But we probably should let Aaron go home. And yeah, no, we're good. Thanks, everyone. This was great. Thank you very much for joining me. This is a really geeky one, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you all did as well. These are all wines that we are going to carry on the regular, at least for the next couple of months. Past that, you know, if they don't sell, obviously it's not going to be around. But I think these wines are good enough. We're going to stick with them for at least the next few months. So thank you very much for joining us. We will have Situation on Wednesday and Scotch Tasting on Friday. For Andrew Hilton, I'm Kyle. That was Aaron.
Hi.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Good night.